Councillors, staff and members of the public watching our live stream. My name is Maxine Bogue and welcome to the first council meeting of the year, the Napier People and Places Committee, which I chair. This meeting will be followed by the prosperous Napier Committee meeting, which will be chaired by Councillor Graham Taylor. Both are being held on Zoom because of our COVID restrictions, and they're available on our council Facebook page now and after the meetings. A link to the meeting's agendas has been posted in the chat box beside the live stream so you can see what we're talking about. We will open with our karakia. Tu taua mai e ronga, tu taua mai e raro, tu taua mai e roto, tu taua mai e waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, humie, huie, tai ke. Before I begin the business of our meeting, I'd just like to acknowledge and express our condolences to the Hawke family, Toru Hawke and his family, on the recent passing of his wife, Marion, just last month. Moi mai rā e te whaia, haere atu rā. First item of business is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Councillor Tapani and Councillor Taylor for lateness.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move that the apologies be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Price. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those against say no. Carried. Are there any conflicts of interest? There's none, so there's no public forum, I understand, today. Announcements by the Mayor, Mayor Wise.
Morning, and thank you, Councillor Bogue. So welcome everybody to our first committee meeting of 2022. It's hard to believe that we're in February already. Due to the current red traffic light system, we are of course back to holding all our meetings online, and I welcome any online viewers that we have with us today. So 2022 is shaping up to be a busy year, and we've hit the ground running with a number of projects in the pipeline and ready to be delivered. Council and the community alike, however, are facing a number of challenges, and as a nation, of course, we're navigating the ever-evolving COVID pandemic and constantly reassessing what this means for us as individuals, whānau, organisations and communities. This impacts us all in so many ways, not only in our daily lives, but the flow-on effects of supply chain issues, labour shortages and rising inflation, just to name a few. As a council, we have a very ambitious capital program this year, and all of these issues are going to have an impact on how we go about our business and deliver these projects. We will need to be as agile as possible to ensure that we meet these challenges head on. And the ongoing border restrictions continue to affect us with significant drop in revenue across our council-owned tourist facilities. The year ahead also sees the continued rollout of a number of local government reforms, including the Three Waters, the Resource Management Act, Emergency Management, and the overarching local government reform. These central government-driven reforms apply additional pressure on our work programs, as well as creating huge uncertainty for our staff and community during a time that we are already struggling with the uncertainty created by COVID. We will continue to advocate on behalf of our community across all of the proposed reforms to ensure that local voice and representation remains at the core of local decision making. So as I said, a busy year ahead with many challenges. However, I know I speak on behalf of all of council when I say that we are looking forward to working together with our community to ensure Napier is a vibrant, resilient city that honours the people that live in it. So I did just want to welcome everybody today and share what we are facing as we head into 2022. I'd also like to acknowledge that today is, of course, the 91st anniversary of the Hawke's Bay earthquake. We still have a number of survivors with us, and I'd like to pay tribute to them. The earthquake was a defining moment for them and for our city. And as time goes by, the memories of that day become even more precious and important to remember for the sake of future generations knowing the history of our city. We are holding an online memorial service this Saturday at 10 a.m. and I would encourage you to log on to either the Napier City Council or the Waiapu Cathedral Facebook pages, where that will be live streamed. Would love to have you join us at that. So thank you, everyone, and I'll pass back to our chair, Councillor Bogue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no announcements by the chairperson. Is there a notification of any minor matters not on the agenda? Right, there being none, are there any announcements by the management? None. So moving on, the confirmation of minutes. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that the minutes of the Napier People and Places Committee meeting held on Thursday, the 4th of November 2021 be taken as a true and accurate record of the meeting? Moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Crystal. All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. Thank you, carried. Our agenda items, we have 3 agenda items. We have no public excluded agenda items today. Just a reminder that the 3 items that are on our agenda will be debated again at the full council meeting on the 10th of March, when final decisions will be made on the recommendations we pass today. So the first agenda item is the Napier Civil Defence Siren Network removal. And I'd like to ask our Director of Community Services, Ms. Antoinette Campbell, to present this item to us, please. Thank you.
Well, morning, Council. So the purpose of this report is to improve the decommissioning and removal of the remaining Napier City Council owned siren warning system. I would like to introduce our Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Controller, Ian McDonald, and Lisa Pearce, also from the group, to present to this report. We also should have online Dr. Marion Tan from Massey University, Professor David Johnston, also from Massey, and the Principal Scientist of Natural Hazards and Risks with GNS, Dr. Graham Leonard, who will be available to respond to any questions the council might have around the review that's attached to this report. So if I could hand over to Ian McDonald, Group Controller, to take us through a presentation. So I've just been advised it was hard to hear me. Have we got Ian McDonald online to run through?
I can't see him online, Antoinette.
Okay. That is a bit of an issue. I wonder if we can just lay this paper on the table until we can get the relevant, the co-author of the report and the authors of the research report online. I'm not too sure what's happened there, but I might need to make a couple of phone calls.
So thank you, Antoinette. So if we move item 1 to item 2 and item 2 back to item 1, Natasha Mackey, are you ready to present your paper for item 2, which is the strategic review, the strategic housing review? Would we be able to see that now? Are you ready for that, Natasha?
Yes, I am. Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, good, thanks.
Great. Tēnā koutou e ngā iwi, kua hui mai nei ki tēnei zui. Ka nui te mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa. Tēnā koe me wise and tēnā koe Chair Maxine Bogue. Ko Natasha Maki tōku ingoa, he kai whakahaere aho ki Kaunihira o Ahuriri. Ko Kirsten McKeefrey TNA, she's online here somewhere, here Associate Director ia ki te PricewaterhouseCoopers, kei te whanganui ātara ia. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'm Natasha Maki, as Councillor Bogue has introduced me, and I'm the Manager of Community Strategies, and with me today is Kirsten McKeefrey, who's in Wellington. So today you're presented with the summary of the key findings of the Strategic Housing Review. This paper seeks your approval to consult with the community on 3 options as part of the decision-making process around the future of Council's housing. I'd like to acknowledge the guidance from Mayor Wise and Councillor Bogue through their participation in the review to date, and also the council teams that have worked with PwC on this matter. We've got a short presentation to introduce the paper before your consideration of it. First though, a quick outline of the nub of the issue. So council started providing community housing over 50 years ago, and of the 377 units we have, 80% of them are for retirees or people with a disability. Our tenants pay a subsidised rent based on their income, and this has been the sole source of income to cover the costs of the service. Income from the rents has been topped up over the years with money from the housing reserves accounts, which is like a savings account, but this has now all been used up. And now we face shortfalls from this year on. One of the key drivers of the situation is that our housing has aged and the cost to maintain the housing units has increased, while the rent has not increased to the same degree. But there are other factors. Costs in general have increased. So I think we all know, and Mayor Wise mentioned in her introduction too, things like labour, materials and equipment are becoming more and more expensive. We've also had increase in compliance costs, not only the physical unit with items such as smoke alarms and all of the healthy homes requirements, but also the costs of managing within the Residential Tenancy Act. So all of this has increased the costs overall. We're not unique. This has been a major issue facing many councils across New Zealand. We have been limiting our expenditure to addressing health and safety hazards and meeting compliance standards, and just replacing things that are broken. Basically doing what's needed to maintain our units in reasonable condition and meeting the requirements. This year, council will borrow to pay for the shortfall. This is a temporary fix. We can't continue to loan fund these shortfalls ongoing, as we'll be drawing loan upon loan, with repayments adding up and shortfalls continuing, with the underlying problem still remaining. It's a bit like getting more and more credit cards to pay for the groceries. So we have a dilemma. The purpose of council housing is to provide affordable rental housing in Napier, and we've had a long history of doing this. Local government, the council, also has a part to play in supporting the well-being of our community. It does come at a cost. We can't charge affordable rent and expect the rent to cover the costs anymore. There's a lot to consider, the findings of the review, the options that have been identified, but also the wider housing and political landscape, the welfare of our tenants, and how the Napier community feel about the future of council housing. So we can start the presentation now, and we'll do that by starting with just a quick overview of how this review has come to pass. I can do the, so trying to control, here we go. So this journey started in 2018 with a Section 17A review, and that review is something that councils have to do as part of legislation. And the review found that there were two options for council going forward, either to partner with a CHIP or continue to manage the portfolio with redevelopment options. We needed some further information, more detail on this before any decisions could be made. So in 2019, the PwC group were contracted to come in and help us really get into some detail on those options. So there was a first phase of looking at the options, mainly around the how we could keep the housing in a sustainable way, and what the options might be around redevelopment. And the slide looks a bit strange on my screen. I hope you guys can see it. In 2020, we did a deeper dive into the options, and we've now come to the conclusion of this review. The review, just a note, the review was delayed due to COVID-19, and we have had some issues with getting into units, for example, during lockdowns, which has delayed the landing of this review.
Natasha, I don't think we're seeing the whole slide. This, only the left-hand side of it. The right-hand side is incomplete. We only have 2 boxes up there and there's 5 on the original. Yeah.
I don't know if our technical people can. Here we go.
Kia ora, Natasha.
Maybe
It's just slow to load. So I think if you can just continue speaking to it, we would be really grateful. Kia ora.
Thank you. We can always go back to this slide if we need to as well. So if we could have the next slide. So I think what this demonstrates, so the 2018 to now where we are in 2022, really demonstrates that this is a complex issue and that council has taken the time to find out as much information to inform its decision making. I'd like to hand over to Kirsten now, who will talk us through the review and the findings, which will be the next slide as well.
So kia ora, I'm Kirsten McKeefrey, and as Natasha introduced me, I'm from PwC, and we've been working with Natasha now since 2018, as well as met quite a few of the councillors as well at various workshops. Look, we thought we'd start out with just the current state. As Natasha noted, due to the increasing capital expenditure required on your portfolio as it ages, and the fact that the council is wanting to provide affordable housing and therefore not charge full market rents, the cash flow is now on a steady downward trend. Using the LTP figures and the capital expenditure forecasts that we obtained from SPM asset experts when they did full detailed condition assessments, we now estimate that that over the period to 2046, the annualized deficit will be circa $2.2 million, and that by 2046, that accumulated shortfall will reach circa 70 million. So that is quite an issue. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. So what we did was we looked at how do other housing providers and councils manage this. We discovered that, as you know, there are really 3 key things: increasing the rents to market, or increasing the ratepayer contribution, or accessing Crown funding streams such as the income-related rent subsidy or operating supplements. It is important to note, though, that the Crown funding that is available to community housing providers, CHIPs, and what is critical for them to make their models of sustainability and growth work, is not available to councils. So where that led us to was looking at what were the options. So if we go to the next slide. And the options that we looked at were status quo. So looking at this as you currently manage it with your current rental policies, no additional income streams. We looked at the part retain, part sell, so what we called active management, whereby we looked at potentially selling off the 3 social villages, which at the moment are the underperforming assets, retaining all the retirement villages in the same way as they are managed now, so no rental subsidies or changes made and no additional income coming in. We looked at how we could expand or redevelop 2 sites that were identified as underutilised, being Green Meadows East Village, where there is a large piece of land that could be intensified, and secondly, Hastings Munro site, where there is currently just 4 single bed houses that could be demolished and redeveloped. We move to the next slide. So the way that we did this was to undertake our evaluations of the options. We basically completed a financial analysis. We relied on advice from experts to do this. So we sought out detailed asset condition assessments and life cycle budgets from a company called SPM. We sought market valuations of your current portfolio in its current state from Telfer Young. We sought to get concepts to redevelop the 2 identified sites where it could be developed, and we used the expert advice from your own urban planners, from Young and Richards architects, who are very open to using or doing work with Kāinga Ora and providing social housing. And also we used the advice from Ryder Levitt Bucknell, who are quantity surveyors who provided advice on timing and costs to do those developments. We also went out and did market sounding from those parties that we thought would be interested in taking on your assets. Primarily, these were chips who would have access to the income-related revenue streams from Crown and who had common goals with that aligned to Napier City Council's aspirations in terms of providing affordable housing. From all of this, we then put our financial analysis together, and we also looked at other key criteria that the council had in regards to providing housing. And as you'll see on the next slide, the key findings are set out here. So the key findings, we evaluated, as we said, these options, not just on their sustainable financial outlook, but other criteria that we'd worked with the council. The key findings, though, that we found was that the transfer via a sale will provide either income returns from a reinvestment or a positive impact from recycling of that capital. But more importantly, will avoid that annual ratepayer contribution of the deficit that currently sits at 2.2 to 2.3 million. I think the other important things to note when you read this table is that we've talked about a sale as the preferred method because those people we went out to market sounding were not keen to do a lease of your portfolio. For them to be able to call on funds to be able to develop your portfolio and put capital expenditure, they needed to be able to say they owned the assets. Also, the big key thing for you to be aware of is that of those parties that we spoke to, and if they are to take on the assets and maintain affordable housing and at rates and a similar management system as to what you have, they would look to value those properties on a discounted value forecast. So they would look at it as the current income streams that are coming in, and unfortunately that would have a significant impact on the value versus the current book value the council has at the moment, which is based on highest and best use. Natasha, I think that kind of sums it up from where we've got to.
Thank you, Kirsten. Just the next slide, please. So we took the recommended options from PwC and had a look at how we could then produce options for consultation. And what was clear is that we also needed to look at how we could maintain status quo. So as we talked about before, some councils do provide housing themselves, and they do that through a number of means in terms of how that is funded. So there are options for us to continue to provide the housing and continue 100% ownership of the council housing, and that is to either fund the shortfalls that are projected through rates, so rates contributing to that shortfall, or increase the rent, and that would be through rent only. Or you could look at a combination whereby we increase the rents coupled with a contribution from rates as well. With those options, there are different combinations that you could enter into in terms of proportionality, and that would need to be assessed in terms of benefit to each party. The second option, the part retain, part sell, which was the active management option Kirsten talked about, is again the same in terms of there is still projected deficits, and again we could fund those through a rates contribution, subsidised rent contribution, or a combination of the both of those. And then the third option is a transfer option, and we've just listed some potential buyers here. The option itself is transfer, but there are a range of buyers that could be interested. So a CHIP is a community housing provider, and they are registered community housing providers accredited by the government, and they receive that market rent contribution. They also allow the tenant to be charged 25% of their income for market rent. So they have an income-based rent policy if they're eligible. Kāinga Ora, public housing provider, and I think a thing to note there is since the beginning of this process, they have become very active, and in Hawke's Bay, very active in terms of increasing public housing for the community. Finally, a regional housing trust is another option that's been detailed in the paper, and that is in very early stages of exploration, and that would be us transferring our assets into a newly created regional trust, potentially with other councils, and they would then go on to register as a community housing provider. And finally, the open market. Now, I just wanted to note here that this is not the preferred option from the council. It's not favoured by the council. However, it is listed here because it is still a feasible option. In the next slide. So what we're looking at is proposing that all three options are consulted on, so that council can understand the views of the community as part of its decision-making process. And I think this approach recognises that council has not identified a preferred option at this stage. Some key considerations apart from community feedback that the council will be obviously wanting to undertake is community wellbeing. Secure and affordable housing is a key driver of community wellbeing. We also know that housing demand across New Zealand is massive, and Napier's no different. None of these options propose to reduce the housing available, but who can access the housing may change. Central government legislation and policy continue to affect our provision of housing, and all of the options have trade-offs. The consultation is an opportunity for the community to feedback on how it sees council's role in this space, and also the level of support the community is willing to provide. Tenant welfare has been a key consideration throughout the review, and it's reflected on how the options were assessed and now in the proposed consultation process. All of the options have different implementation pathways. with further consultation gateways required where there is a rates impact or a sale of part or all of the portfolio. The pathway and timeframes are dependent on which option is identified as the way forward for housing. And that is the end of our presentation. Kia pai o kōrero. I'd like to hand back to the chair, and Kirsten and I are available for questions as you go through your conversation around the paper.
Thank you very much, Kirsten and Natasha. Now, are there any questions from councillors concerning that presentation? Right, so there are no questions. Well, obviously it was a very thorough presentation.
Excuse me, Maxine, you have Councillor Bogue trying to get your attention.
Councillor who?
Apologies, Chair, Councillor. You are Councillor Bogue, indeed. Who was it? Someone was waving. Councillor Brown, apologies.
Councillor Brown, sorry. My bad.
Sorry, just getting used to finding the raise hand button on this one. Kia ora, and thank you for that presentation. That was really good. I was just wondering, that government funding that's available to the CHIPs, have we engaged with the government around what the reasons are that they don't give it to councils? And is there any appetite for this to change?
Through the chair, oh, sorry, Maxine, Councillor Bogue, would you like to answer that?
I just wondered if the Chief Executive would like to make a comment there. She got your hand up before.
Kia ora. So to the question and through the chair, there have been a number of discussions with central government with respect to the appetite to allow local government to access CHIPs. And at this stage, they have signalled that there is no intention for this being a possibility.
I'd just like to add, we as a council have taken several remits to local government New Zealand conferences seeking them to lobby central government over the years to give us access to the income related rent subsidy. They are still trying, but it seems, I think, for the money, how much it would cost the central government may be a big issue there. But we have tried because it would really solve our problems at the moment. Natasha, do you have something to add to that? I know you've helped us with those remits.
No, I think you've answered that fully.
Right. Did that answer your question, Councillor Brown?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Good one, though. Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. One of them is around consultation fatigue. So I note in the resolution that we have the note that additional consultation may be required, and obviously we're concerned around consulting on the same issue multiple times with our community. So I'm just wondering if you could talk us through how that may come about and what options we have to potentially remove the need for further consultation.
Natasha.
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, so I think these consultation requirements are driven by the legislation. So really what we're looking for in this consultation process is feedback on the three options from the community to inform your decision making around the option that you would like to select as the pathway forward. And depending on the impact of that option, there are certain requirements that we would have to meet. And in terms of further consultation, that would either be done through an annual plan next year, where the community could be informed about your proposed option and provide feedback, or if it is about the transfer of the strategic asset, then that would be through an LTP amendment or an LTP, again with a proposal and seeking feedback from the community before the final decision would be made. So it is a long process, unfortunately, but I think it is a significant matter as well.
It is. Through you, Madam Chair, just a couple more questions, if that's all right. Natasha, could you talk me through how the consultation material will be developed for this phase?
Through the chair. So we are already working on creating consultation material based on the statement of proposal, the draft that's included in the paper. There are two key pathways really. One is that there'll be information available to the community around the pros and cons of each option and particularly the financial impacts for each party, and you will see that noted in the paper. And we're also developing some direct communication with each of our tenants, because each of our tenants are affected differently, and so we just want to outline how each of these options would affect them individually as a household. And we propose to have a range of engagement opportunities for both tenants, other stakeholders who have an interest in this matter as well, and then using our usual consultation methods for the wider public.
And just further to that, through you, Madam Chair, do we propose to bring back to Council a consultation plan and consultation material for approval?
Not usually to that level of detail. The high-level consultation plan is included. We're happy to continue to work with Councillor Bogue in particular, who is the portfolio manager for housing, in developing that material, and happy to have any feedback.
Thank you. I do have one more question, Councillor Bogue, but perhaps I could ask it later. I see there's a number of other hands up.
Could I just add to what Natasha, thank you for that, said about further consultation? If the council decides after the hearings in May to maintain the status quo, I understand we will not need to do any further consultation. It's only if we were to transfer any of the asset, I understand then we would have to go out for further consultation. Is that correct, Natasha?
In response to that, it depends on which funding mechanism the council decides is the best way forward. So if there is a rates impact, and you'll see that the rates impact for status quo is large, that would require us to go back through the annual plan. However, if the council decides that it could be funded through raising rent, then that is able to be implemented immediately with no further consultation.
Thank you. Now, I don't know if I've got this in the right order, but Councillor McGrath, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you for that. Just through the chair, just a question that I need clarifying. If we were to transfer to a chip, does that mean we lose the land and the buildings forever and a day?
Through the chair, so the transfer option is a full sale option. However, there is a condition that the council has wanted to be included, which is that should the chip decide to sell in the future, that the council basically would have first right of reply based on the same sale conditions, because as Kirsten outlined, it is likely that a sale to a chip would result in a discounted cash rate, and so that's at a lower rate than the book value. So we would expect that the return would be on the same conditions. But yes, the answer is yes, all of the buildings and the land would be part of that sale.
Yep. Thank you.
Mayor Wise.
Thank you, and through the chair. We've had a number of questions from community members regarding the sort of history around the rent revenue that's been received and how that's been utilised. And I guess for any online viewers, I was just wondering, Natasha, if you would mind just providing us with a little bit of background around what we do know about the historical use of the rent revenue that's been received from our housing portfolio.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, I'm very aware that this has been a concern from the community as this matter's kind of come to light. What I can confirm is we have been doing a little bit of looking at the history of how the service has been funded, and we've gone back so far to 2007. Obviously, record keeping was different in the earlier days, but what we have been able to ascertain is that from 2007 at least, the income from the rents has only been used to cover the service. There has been no additional income. In the past, the any income that had been left over, if you like, from any given year, that was put into the housing reserve. So I mentioned that before. We have been using that housing reserve, like our savings account for housing, to pay for kind of some of the big costs. So for example, a couple of years ago, we had to replace roofs in one of the villages at a cost of around $300,000. And we were able to access our savings to pay for that. So there is no evidence that we can find that any of the rental income has been used for anything but housing. And in fact, there is some evidence that there was some renewal funding provided through rates earlier on. In 2018, the council ring-fenced the budget away from all of the other council accounts, if you like. And so that is very, very clear from 2018 that there is no movement between the housing costs and income to anything else in council. So we can say that the rental income has been used to pay for the costs of the housing. We are, and this kind of goes on from Deputy Mayor's question around the information that we're providing, we are going to be providing some information about what the income is spent on in terms of all of the costs associated with housing. And I think one of the things to note is that, you know, we pay for the costs around maintaining the units, maintaining the grounds, etc., and that is times 377. So it is a lot of money.
Does that answer your question, Liz?
It does, thank you. And I'm not sure if anyone else is experiencing issues with freezing screens and things like that, but I just wonder if I could suggest that perhaps we turn off videos except for the chair and people that are speaking at the time to assist with it if anyone else is experiencing those problems.
Right, moving on, I see hands raised by Councillor Simpson. Sorry, and Councillor Brosnan, but Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Natasha, for clarifying where the rental incomes go to and how it's been secured and used to offset maintenance. I think the thing we need to be very mindful of, this has been a very long and drawn out process, and I think we need to acknowledge the tenants and staff that have been involved in this process and the stress and the anxiety that this process is causing, and apologise. All we can do is apologise that this will take a bit longer, but we want the best outcome for both the tenants and our ratepayers. My question relates to commentary within the PwC report where they identify some of the vacant land blocks, and I'll use the example of the land around the Green Meadows East Community Centre as potential for development. So my question is, if we were to go to the sell option, is it predetermined that those currently vacant land blocks would be included, or are they currently excluded from what we would be proposing to sell?
Through the chair, they are included in the proposal to sell. I'll just confirm that with Kirsten McKeefrey if I can.
Sorry, Natasha, yes, I can confirm they are included in the sale option. They are what makes it attractive to CHIPS and also Kāinga Ora. It allows them to build and grow their portfolios. So that is what attracts them to it, especially for Kāinga Ora. They are about the development of new.
Through you, Madam Chair, can I just ask a further question? I note the valuation in the reports were dated October 2020. So our current valuation effectively doesn't take into account the escalated values up to 30% within the Napier market to current day value. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. I think we have noted that it's always a point in time of information and that the underlying premise remains. However, we are aware that subsequent to a decision being made, that a lot of this information would need to be updated as well. So, and depending on when that is, so we could do revaluations now, but if there was a transfer option, as we've noted, that will still take some time to implement, and we'll need to do those valuations again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a concern, I suppose, that I'd like to tease out, if that's all right, Natasha. So the preferred option development, I think that's page 19 on our agenda from the PwC report. You had the table up on one of your slides. So the outcome of that was to consult on all feasible options. And I suppose my concern is about how we have defined feasible options. So I'm really concerned that the option to transfer and the option to sell on the open market have been bundled together. So I suppose I want to ask, why do we see the full sale on the open market bundled together with the transfer to a chip? Because in my mind, they are very separate outcomes. And why are we consulting on them together when, as I think you mentioned in your introduction to the paper, it's inconsistent with the review outcome of feasibility if we define that as keeping affordable housing for our people. And that's inconsistent as well with the direction I think Council's given around what it wants to achieve, because we do want to retain affordable housing. So that key concern for me is, why have we bundled them together when one of them is not feasible, if our definition of feasible is keeping affordable housing?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. So the feasibility is different from perhaps the vision that the council has. So in terms of the option, the feasible option is a transfer option. The buyer or the method of transfer nets different impacts. And so in the principles of consultation, we do need to be able to outline all of the options and the various impacts to then have the informed feedback around which option or pathway the community would like to provide that feedback on for the council. The council ultimately decides and is able to take into these other considerations in their decision making. But through special consultative procedure, we do need to provide the feasible options, and technically you could sell to the open market. It doesn't meet the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. However, it is a feasible option to proceed with. So I hope that answers your question.
I think I would accept that, Natasha, as an answer if we hadn't bundled them together, if you know what I mean. By bundling them together in the proposed consultation way, we're not allowing the community, because I don't have the detail of the consultation plan, we're not allowing the community to see the different outcomes. We literally have one option there, which is sell, and that includes both the transfer and the sell on the open market.
Yep, that is a really good point. Through the chair, I think at this point we are not wanting to limit the pathways of a transfer, but that we are providing the information about all of the different options, so their community will be able to feedback on whether they prefer the open market versus the sale to a chip versus sale to a kāinga order. Obviously, a sale is dependent on who wants to buy.
And
so I think just to reiterate, we will be providing the information and the impact of an open market sale versus a chip sale, because they do have a different financial impact potentially.
Yeah, thank you. And quite a different outcome. So that's, I suppose,
Correct.
where I was looking to get some clarity to make sure that we are differentiating them appropriately in the consultation document. I may have something further. I'll just ponder on it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions. My first is around, especially around option 3. We've talked about a regional housing trust, and thank you, Natasha, you did outline in your introduction that that is very early on in our thinking, but I'm wondering about what additional information will be available to us after the hearings to help inform our decision making around the palatability or the viability of that kind of structure.
Kia ora, Councillor Crown, through the chair. So we are engaging with other councils, but as I have outlined in the paper, it's very, very early stages, and actually this has come up as a potential during the later stages of the review. So I think it's fair to say that it is a very similar scenario as transferring to a chip, because ultimately that's what it would be. And so it is an option, and we will be able to provide an update with as much information as we have at the time.
I guess, sorry, just a statement, it would be awesome to include in that the sort of time frame attached for an organisation to actually complete the process to become a chip, so that we've got some time frames and ideas around that.
Through the chair, so we understand it can be a minimum of 12 months, but I will see what I can find out about that, because I think that is a really good piece of information for you.
Thank you. And if I may, just one more, Councillor Bogue. I'm just wondering around the gap between book value and the discounted value. I'm wondering if there's a standardised formula around that, or how would that work?
Through the chair, I'll hand this one over to Kirsten McKeefrey.
Thank you for that question. There is no standard formula. The way a discounted cash flow, the way a chip would look at purchasing, or Kāinga Ora potentially would look at purchasing, would be based on the covenants that you place with the portfolio. So if you're looking to sell the portfolio with the requirements for them to retain it as a retirement village or a social village, and with certain requirements about what the rental levels could be, a potential purchaser will look at what that income stream will be going forward, and they will look at that income stream over the period and apply a capital rate or how much they want to return on that, and that's how they will just come up with their purchase value. And because it will be limited to the fact that they cannot do highest and best use on the property, it will be significantly less in this case, because they won't be able to get market rents or actually demolish and redevelop should that be a highest and best use. So it is likely to be significantly less. What that number will be dependent when you put it to market. I'm sorry, there's no definitive formula around that.
Thank you.
I would just like to add something about the regional trust. As we know, this proposal, we are double debating it, and it may well be that by the time we come to sign it off in March, that there may be some news and sufficient information to include that extra information, hopefully, in the final proposal that we sign off that goes out for consultation. Is that so, Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, we'll provide any updates on any of the information that we do have to hand, either prior to the 10th of March or at the meeting, yes.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Christa.
Through the chair. Having visited some of our villages and got to know some of the tenants, I'd like to concur with Councillor Simpson that they're going through a really hard time through this, and it is taking a long time, but we do want to do the right thing. Now, just Kirsten, you sort of partly answered my question about being able to put covenants on a potential buyer, because I know we've indicated as a council we don't want anyone to be evicted from their homes. And is this something that's been done before? Is it a hard process to do this? And will it stack up? Can they get round it?
Kirsten, I'll get you to answer that one.
Thank you for that. Very good question. An answer to has it been done before? Yes. So both Tauranga and Hamilton have divested parts of their housing community portfolios. And when they have done that with the restrictions on the titles and sale, that those properties have to be retained for community housing and social housing. So yes, it has been done before, and yes, you can do it. It is not hard to do. Where it becomes an issue is as it becomes an impact on the value that you will receive for the land. And I guess, and further to that, it was raised before that whether or not you get to have that, you lose that property forever and ever. The answer is, as Natasha answered before, yes, a sale is a sale, but you can put on the sale conditions that if the purchaser looks to either change the use, so they are no longer wanting to provide community housing as you're requiring, or alternatively want to sell, then they will be required to offer back to the council as first right of refusal on the same terms as conditions as which they purchased. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Look, I apologise. I'm going to have to keep my video off. I've got unstable internet, so hopefully I can. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, can.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Natasha, the fact that we've put options together and we're consulting on options does not necessarily lock us into any one of the options. So in other words, if we had a diverse response with multiple residents replying and we had more or less equal feedback across the four options, we're not actually locked into, and I think this is in part, I was sort of thinking this through while Councillor Brosner was asking her questions. The reality is what we're doing is seeking feedback so that we can then formulate the best case option. Is that how it would work? In other words, if feedback predominantly came in on option 3, but we could put together a better business case, because I think there's some gaps in the current business case around status quo and transfer, but we're not locked into one or other of the options, are we, through the feedback process?
Through the chair, no. And I think that by going out with the 3 options with no proposed option, no preferred option, you're clearly demonstrating that you are considering all of the options. How those options end up, and I think that's what you're alluding to, you'll be taking into consideration the feedback through consultation, but also other things. So if there are developments, for example, with a regional trust idea, or there's a change in government policy, or there's some other factors that could be considered within the timeframe that we're talking about, then the options can be modified. And I think the thing to note here is that when you go out for consultation, you're going out with the best information you have now. And as you decide the option to go forward with and you implement that option, of course, more and more detail is provided and sought as implementation actually takes place. So I think we're talking about probably the philosophical direction and obviously there are impacts for a number of parties, and so really taking into consideration how those impacts are for the community and how then you would like to go forward.
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, that question obviously was also set to appease some of our viewers who may be stressed about this current situation. And it's important that we then identify that simply going through this process could then confirm for us more refined options that then requires a second consultation to get perspective. Is that how that would work?
I think the process is up to the council. Obviously, ideally, there would be a clear path from the consultation and the subsequent hearings and decision making on your part. And then we would go forward, and there are the consultation gateways, as I've mentioned before, depending on which option is the pathway forward.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, finally from me, probably a question aimed at PwC. When we make our considerations, obviously over time, this council has established what I would consider a reasonably substantial asset value in units and property. Is there, if we look at sale, and I use that word if we look at sale, how do we determine that we haven't had a fire sale? Because I think we need to be clear that where is the threshold that turns it from a good sale to a heck, we've given these away, and effectively the investment that ratepayers have made in these assets has been sold down the road effectively. And I just wonder, is there a way for us to determine a baseline that then sets other gateways open? In other words, if the CHPs or the Kangaroo are coming back and offering us bargain basement prices, is there a financial threshold that says to us, well, actually, now we should be looking at changing status quo as a paradigm to seek some form of return on the ratepayers' investment? Is there a number that we have in mind, or is there a number that we can calculate that tells us whether selling is actually financially the best decision?
Kirsten, I'll let you answer that one.
Thank you for that. At the moment, with the way your assets are, they're running at a loss. If you were to sell them and want them to continue to provide the service that they are, people are going to look at the cash flow that they are going to attain from that. And at the moment, as they exist, without that access to the IRRS, so the Crown funding, those assets, unfortunately, if you want to maintain them as affordable housing, are actually a negative value. So I think the answer is not, we haven't come up with a what is better than, than status quo, except that I would say status quo at the moment is unaffordable for you in the current way you are running it. The only way that you will achieve to get a really good sale is to be able to sell that land at market value, with it unencumbered. So whereby the purchaser has the right to use it the highest and best use. I think there's always going to be a discount, and it will be up to the council to work out the balance between what the value is of providing that service by themselves without assistance versus where they could reinvest that money if they received it. I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I think the reason that the transfer is considered, and we have put that forward, is that the chips and Kainga will be able to get a better cash flow from it than the council can under the current legislative rules. And so therefore the council, if they transfer it, can divest the money they receive into other things they may want to provide. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Just to add, Just to add to that as well, Councillor Simpson, I think this has been an issue for some other councils that have gone down this pathway, and this is what we were talking about before in terms of trade-offs. So if the council wanted to retain the housing in the affordable rental space, then obviously there is a hit, I guess, if you like, to the actual price and or proceeds that would come back. So it's always a trade-off around where the priorities are in terms of what the council want to achieve.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think what we're really talking about is even between the chips, no one's playing with a level playing field. There is actually only one. When you read the reports and look at government policy, there's actually only one provider that is advantaged over everybody else in this market. And what we have to be very mindful of is that they don't then take advantage of that as far as any offer that they may place on our table. But thank you for your answers. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Mayor Wise.
Thank you, and through the chair, this should be a pretty quick question. Just wanting to tease out Councillor Crystal's question a little more around the conditions or covenants we can place on any sale and purchase agreement. Can that be as specific, and this is probably a question for Kirsten, can that be as specific as specifying that we want to secure the tenancies for current tenants to be able to live in the houses for as long as they wish to?
Kirsten, I'll let you answer that one.
Thank you, Kirsten. Yes, the answer is you can put on restrictions such as that. It will always have an impact on the value that you receive in return. So yes, and that has been done in the past. The examples are with Tauranga and Hamilton. They required that their existing tenants were able to stay under their existing contracts for the length of their rest of their life. So yes, it is possible to do and has been done successfully.
Great, thank you very much.
I'd just like to elaborate on something that hasn't been mentioned in terms of the distinction between community housing provider purchasing the asset versus Kāinga Ora. I understand that a community housing provider cannot apply for income-related rent subsidy on existing tenants immediately. It is only for the new tenants who come in and meet the criteria. So that would be a bit of a disincentive. Whereas I understand Kāinga Ora can get income-related rent subsidy, i.e. the tenant would only pay 25% of the rent and the provider, in this case Kāinga Ora, would get the difference between that and the market rental. So it is going to be quite a difference when the different, if that is looked at. I think that's quite an important distinction.
That is what we understand as the situation at the moment.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going back to that previous answer to that previous question that I asked around why would we not consult on an open market sale when it's essentially not palatable to council, and this may be a governance question. Natasha, you mentioned that we must consult on all essentially financially feasible options, but my understanding is that council is not bound to consult on all options, and if council was of a mind to remove the sell on the open market from the consultation, it could do that at this time. And so my question is, whilst we may not want to provide a preferred option at this stage, we certainly could discount some unfeasible options as per our definition of feasibility around affordability, even if they were described as philosophical. You can see where my line of thinking is.
Through the chair, yes, you can exclude options. My requirement is to present you with all of the options. So, but as the paper says, there is an option for you to even identify a preferred option and go out with preferred option and the other options. So it is up to you what you consult on from here.
Thank you, Natasha. Just foreshadowing that with you, Madam Chair, that's where my line of thinking is at the moment.
Thank you very much. Well, you would be well within our rights to change the proposal, modify the proposal in any way, such as removing that option should we get a mover and a seconder and be able to discuss it. Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I'm not sure if we're rounding this off or not. I just wanted to acknowledge Natasha and staff and Kirsten for a very thorough presentation. I mean, if someone come on here from the public and had no knowledge of this whatsoever, but just thought we were booting people out, they'd definitely come away with a much more sound knowledge about the complexity and the balance issues that we have as a council to try and balance the economic issues and obviously the social and human impacts as well. And just following on from Councillor Simpson and Crystal, just acknowledging the tenants that are in there at the moment. And we do want to do the right thing, obviously, and try and get a good balance. So thank you.
Thank
Kia
you.
ora, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Haven't missed anybody. Well, that was a very robust discussion and covered a lot of clarifying what this proposal is. So the next step is for us to look at the officer's recommendation, which is to resolve to undertake a special consultative procedure based on the attached statement of proposal on all three options with no preferred option identified, and note that further consultation may be required depending on the decision made following this consultation. Now, Councillor Deputy Mayor Brosnan, if you wanted to make an amendment to the proposal, I'm sure that would be in order now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't put any particular work into wording, but I would be interested in Council debating preferred option of transfer and going out with the alternative options of the part retain, part sell, and the status quo provision as outlined in the report findings. So I would be interested in moving that as a recommendation that Council consult on three options, being the status quo provision as per the report, the part retain and part sell option as per report, and the modified option 3, essentially removing the open market sale, so transfer into a community housing provider, a CHIP, removing that sale on the open market. I would also be interested in a C, that a detailed consultation plan and consultation documents be approved by Council. So I would be interested in Council's view on that option.
Well, let's put it on the table. If you're moving that, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, is there a seconder? Councillor Brown. So would you like to speak to, is governance clear, the wording of the recommendation?
I can put it up on the screen if you want me to.
That would be helpful.
Still in the process of writing it.
It's all right. Looking at the options. So it would be under 2.7 as it is now, the options available to Council, development of preferred option. Resolve to take special consultation. Does that...
sorry,
yeah.
What was C again, Deputy Mayor?
That was something along the lines of that the detailed consultation plan and consultation document be approved by Council.
Through you, Madam Chair, can I just ask, would Councillor Brosnan, would you just consider altering the transfer sell option? At the moment, we're locked into a regional housing trust. Would you be prepared to amend your resolution to include a regional / or local housing trust?
Yes, happy to include that. Thank you. That's a good point, Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, I think if the more flexibility we have at the end of this process, the greater our options are for a successful outcome.
Yeah, so I think the option to transfer could include and I suppose you could put in brackets, CHIP or community housing, or local community housing provider.
And Kāinga Ora? Because it's neither of those. What you're doing, I expect, Councillor Deputy Mayor, is removing the open market option and retaining the others. So
yes, happy to include that.
Yep. I think the Regional Housing Trust is already in the transfer sell option.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So that's not changed, but
no, through you, Madam Chair, the suggestion I made was to dilute that slightly from purely a regional option to being regional or a local option.
Okay, adding that wording.
Yep.
What do you mean by a local option?
Well, if somebody within Napier was to have established a trust, or if there's an existing trust that might want to take it over and just look after that Napier estate, I think at the moment that's not an option when we look at the trust option. At the moment, the trust option is purely regional.
Right. Do we need to say, Deputy Mayor, do we need to say thus removing the option of the sale to the open market? Do you want to be clearer on that?
Yes, we could include a note under that, note the removal of open market sale, if that's helpful for the discussion.
Sorry. I'll fix up that number in.
Okay, and Councillor Brown, did you want to speak at this stage?
Could I speak to the resolution?
Oh, sure.
Just before you start talking to the resolution, would you mind if I'm just through the chair if I make a comment, please?
Please do.
Just in relation to removing a practicable option, can we just note in the resolution the reasons why council have removed that, just for a future pathway if there was any sort of further request or understanding as to why council did that? It would be very useful as a pathway for our decision making. So it could be for the reasons it does not meet council outcomes in maintaining
affordable housing.
That'd be great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, happy to include, note the removal of the open market sale option as it does not achieve the affordable housing outcome council is looking to deliver through its housing portfolio. We'll just change option to outcome.
So would you like to speak to that now, Deputy Mayor?
Can I just ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Sorry. On the open market, how do we know it won't achieve? That's for the Deputy Mayor. How do we know it won't achieve the outcome?
I mean, I think that's reasonably self-explanatory, Councillor Price, because on the open market you cannot apply covenants to the land or things in the agreement that would achieve the same, say 25 or 30% of rental income, which is achieved through the housing, the CHIP providers, and all of those who are eligible for the government IRRS. And also private sales are not eligible for the IRRS, so would not be able to achieve that same level of affordability. However, I note the Chief Executive also has a comment to make on that.
So just beforehand, is what if a wealthy person decided they wanted to give something to Napier and purchase this? Are they they aren't counted in because we've made them, they can't?
In that scenario, Councillor Price, I would suggest they would need to form a trust and apply for that status so that we as council would be assured in perpetuity that they would achieve that outcome.
So just further that, by leaving it in there, does it hurt that option? Making it open for someone to make an inquiry?
They could still achieve that under the amendment Councillor Simpson made of a local community housing provider.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was actually just going to suggest, and if I could have the resolution up again, I was going to suggest that the words "is not likely" is probably more correct, or when we're talking about with respect to the open market, just building on the conversation that has just happened. Governance, can I have the resolutions up again, please? So under 1, I note that the removal of the open market sale, as it is not likely to achieve the affordable housing outcome, because it is all about workload. So we do need to focus our efforts in consultation on what is practicable, just for further conversation. Thank you.
Right, just waiting for that to be rewritten.
Sorry, I can't speak and
Right.
unmute and share my screen at the same time. Sorry, what was that again, Steph? You want to change the...
So under 1I, note the removal of the open market sale, as it is not likely to achieve the affordable housing outcomes, or is not practicable, really for councillor debate, but I do think it is more correct.
I'm happy with not likely.
Right, are there any other suggested amendments?
That change?
Sorry,
what was that?
Thank you for what Steph has just moved that around a little bit. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, would you like to speak to the resolution that you have moved?
Yeah, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, just confirming my motion was that we had the preferred option of a transfer. And I'm just wondering if that needs to be separated out there. We'll consult on the 3 options, but that council had a preferred option of transfer. And I'm happy if there's a bit of discussion about that before it's finally moved. If there's not an appetite around the table for that preferred option, I would leave it off to save time.
Are you suggesting that we go out with a preferred option as opposed to the 3 options that we ended consulting on?
Yeah, I was interested in council's view on that.
I wonder if that might be a separate resolution.
Happy to do it as a separate resolution, but I was just thinking to save time, if that was not going to be palatable to council, I suppose we could take it separately through you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so how do people feel about that?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I have got my hand raised, but
just
sorry.
I just can't see them. Yeah.
Just wanting to indicate very early that I would not be supporting going out with a preferred option.
I wondered if that might be the case around the table, so perhaps we'll leave it out, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think that would suit me also. Right, so there's the amended recommendation in front of us. Would you like to speak to it, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really quickly, this is sort of a highly emotive topic for our community as a whole, and obviously those people that are currently our tenants, and it's also highly political. One of the biggest issues for me with consultation is the kind of short way that we have to present our options, and in turn the way that the community get to interpret those options with the limited information that's often available to the majority. So I was concerned that that option to sell may foster a bit of misunderstanding around council removing community housing from the community, where it is not in fact the intention of council to do that. It is about securing the provision of affordable community housing into the future, and doing that in a sustainable way where ratepayers and tenants all benefit, and where there's no direct subsidy from rates from our community, because we all know that rates are going up. And finding a sustainable and affordable way forward for everyone is really important. And so that's why I was keen to see the open market option removed from our consultation, as I just think it muddies the water. It's really important to me as well that the consultation questions reflect those feasible options, and understandably, you know, the way they were presented there, I was really keen to see that come back to us for approval because it is such an important topic. And yeah, as I previously said, I don't think it was an option to sell on the open market. So happy to leave it there and see what council thinks.
And governance, would it be possible for the resolution to stay on the screen, and I'll try and pick up where the hands up,
Sure.
so that then we're speaking to it. Councillor Brown, you have seconded that. Would you like to speak in reserve or speak now?
I'm happy to speak now. Basically, I was just seconding the line of thinking, but happy to formally support and second the motion. I like the amendment as it just clarifies things and means that our communication and consultation will be clearer. So that's all from me.
Right. Mayor Wise, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bogue, and through the chair, I'd like to speak in support of the recommendation before us, and I do want to acknowledge everyone that's been involved to date in the review and pulling this information together. It has been a very long, complicated process, and I think that, you know, we are now in a position where we've got 3 really viable options that we can go out and consult on with our community. And you know, acknowledging that for me personally, our priority is absolutely about protecting our existing tenants, and we've heard today that there are mechanisms for us to do this with each of the option, even those sell options, by including conditions around tenancy and securing those. So I think it's vital that we do consult on the 3 options, because ultimately this decision affects all our ratepayers, and as such we are seeking feedback from our entire community on the 3 options. So I just want to strongly encourage everybody that wants to make their views heard and wants to provide input into this does so through the consultation process. And as this has been dragging on for quite some time now, I really am looking forward to being able to take the next steps and discuss this with our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are there other people who wish to speak? You might just have to speak, because I've made the choice of having the proposal in front of us and I can't see if there are any raised hands.
Yes, just through the chair.
Councillor McGrath.
Yeah. I'm a little bit hesitant with removing the option of selling on the open market, but understanding that the consultation is, I guess first and foremost, I want to reiterate what Mayor Wise said about protecting our tenants, but our wider community also have a role here, because depending on what's chosen, is ratepayers may end up picking up the bill. And I've certainly had conversations with people in the past who say housing is not our core business. It's not something we should be doing. So while I liked the option to sell on the open market, I also understand there's nothing stopping our other residents, our other people in the community from putting in a submission to say they'd like them sold. It would be interesting to see what sort of numbers come back on that, not that consultation's about numbers, or whether people's thinking has changed and housing is part of what we do now under the Local Government Act. I'd be interested to see, and you know, just because it's not written there, they can still put that information to us. So that's all.
I'm prepared to suspend standing orders if everybody would like to have a say on this, rather than 3 for, 3 against. So if you would like to have a say on it, all of you will have the opportunity to do that. But just remember, that this comes back to us on the 10th of March. We're not signing it off permanently, finally today. So there will be opportunities even for further amendments at that date. And yeah, that's the main thing really, that this is the best that we can do at the moment. So I'd be happy to hear from any of you for or against the proposal as it is in front of us now. But because I've got decided to put that up. I can't see if you've got your hands up. So as I say, just button, please.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Did Councillor McGrath speak in favour or against the motion?
Councillor McGrath, I think he spoke in favour of it. Is that so, Councillor McGrath?
Yes, through the chair. Yes.
Thank you.
Point of order taken.
Chair Bogue, I'm of the same feeling, a little bit like Councillor McGrath. I was a little bit reluctant to have the open market option removed because I think there will be people in the community who would suggest that that is the best option. However, as Councillor McGrath has said, that does not, and we have seen in the past where we have put documents out for consultation that the community has provided other options that we weren't included in the actual consultation document. So, Deputy Bear, I am prepared to support it, but I think the community will also wish to give their feelings about whether or not we retain this portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Next. Are there any other people, any other councillors who would like to make comments? So far we have had Councillor Taylor, McGrath, Mayor Wise, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Price. Are there any others who would like to speak on this?
I'll speak, Max.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Christopher.
Sorry, Chairman. I just like to really encourage, I support the motion and really encourage our community to give us the feedback that we're going out and asking for. Unlike what people think, our minds are not made up, and it's really, really important to hear the feedback from everyone. And we do really care about what happens to our tenants, and I just, that's what I want to see as a really good, robust from the community response.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. Is there another speaker?
Through you, Madam Chair. Again, I'll just need to leave my video off. I've got unstable internet. I speak in favour of the motion. I think it is a sensible approach. But like others, I would encourage anybody with an interest in this to share their views with us through the consultation process. The broader the views that are expressed with us, the greater the opportunity we end up with the best outcome for both the tenants and the current investors who are the ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I would like to also speak in support of this recommendation, this amended recommendation, and thank you for those who made the amendments. I see this review as an opportunity for us to put all the information we have about this situation in front of the public, and I think it's very healthy for us to have expressed no preference for any of the stated options. I think it goes without saying that we do care about the over 400 of our most vulnerable citizens who we are currently housing, and we have placed covenants on any proposed sale which would ensure they would retain their tenancy, as well as us requesting or wanting the kaupapa of any proposed sale to be the continuation of housing for needy people, and particularly the elderly. I just wanted to add something to the process. When the Section 17A review was first done, they came up with two options, was sell all of it or sell part of it. And it was council that put the other option in, which was retain the status quo. So there has been a loud voice from our council to have that option in there as well. And like Deputy Mayor Brosnan, when I saw the option, and I did speak to Ms Mackey about it, the option of sale on the open market in there, I was, oh no, slightly horrified and thinking, gosh, are we just, looking like we'd be okay with putting it out there and anybody buying it and the tenants going, losing their tenancy. So I'm quite comfortable with that being taken out, but also there is the option, if anybody who has a good reason to do so, to place that back if they have a proposal or a good reason to put that back in. So once again, I support the amended recommendation and commend it to your approval. Are there any other speakers? We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, including myself, speaking in support of it. Are we ready to put the motion?
I briefly have my right of reply, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just acknowledging those comments of Councillor McGrath and Councillor Taylor and I think Councillor Simpson around the option of the market sale. I think they're correct that we will have, in my feeling, as a small sector of our society that is prepared to sell these on the open market. And I think in my mind, that's why it's quite important that we see the consultation document come back to us so that we provide space in an open way for all of those community comments, and let's do consultation in a way where we truly get that qualitative feedback, the real detail that helps us inform our decision making. So just acknowledging those comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right, well, when I put the motion, could you please, governance, put the full screen on so I can see everybody? Right, well, you've seen the motion, and I'd like to put it now. So all those in favour say aye, or put your hand up. All those against say no. The recommendation is carried, and thank you very much for that very robust discussion, and look forward to discussing it again at your next meeting, Mayor Wise. Right, well, moving on or moving back, are we ready for the agenda item 1, which is the Napier Civil Defence Siren Network removal? Antoinette.
We are. Thank you, Councillor Poe.
Thank you.
So I would like to introduce some guests we have online. The co-author of this report, Ian McDonald, the Hawke Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Controller, and Lisa Pearce, who is also with the group, Team Leader Hazard Reduction. We also have online the authors of the attached review to the report, Dr. Marion Tan from Massey University, Professor David Johnston, also of Massey University, and Dr. Graham Leonard, Principal Scientist with GNS Science. So this report covers a public alerting system review that was commissioned by the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management Group and carried out by the authors online for the Joint Centre for Disaster Research. It identified that the emergency mobile alerting system supported by mobile apps is the most effective alerting system available right now, and highlighted that our existing Napier siren system is not fit for purpose. It does not meet the New Zealand standard for tsunami sirens and would require significant upgrades to be an effective warning system if we were to retain it. It is therefore recommended that the current Napier siren system is decommissioned and removed. We've got a couple of presentations today, so I think first up I'd like to hand over to Dr. Graham Leonard from GNS to run through his presentation, and then Mr. McDonald will run through his. Dr. Leonard.
Kia ora. Now, I think the presentation is at your end and you'll bring it up, or would you like me to share my screen?
I believe we've got
it here. John, can you share that, please?
I'll just say next slide, please, when I'm ready for the next slide, if that works. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and the time to speak. As introduced, I'm Graham Leonard. I'm a principal scientist at GNS Science in Wellington here. And I work with David Johnson and Marion Tan at Joint Centre for Disaster Research, Massey University, who are the lead authors on this report. Next slide, please. So this was a gap analysis and critical review of the Hawke's Bay suite of warning public alerting tools. And the goal there was to assess the suitability of existing and other alerting tool options for use across the region. So the review considers international best practice and effective warnings research, which especially David and I have been involved with for the last 20 years around the world. And in the context of the latest national alerting developments, which again, we're quite involved with. And it provides some recommendations for prioritized actions. Next slide, please. Methodologically, and the reason for my involvement is it follows international and domestic systems review, uses an effectiveness scoring system and criteria that I helped develop. There are 4 critical criteria, especially for Hawke's Bay, around giving heads up as well as instruction, whether or not the system needs to be opted into or not, and how long it takes to reach all of the population. Another key context is warnable hazards. The key point here being fast onset hazards compared to others. Takes into consideration geographic variability in those hazards and where people live, the population. Looks at system coverage, e.g. especially with new technologies, mobile networks. And looks at potentials for backbone options and infill needs for pockets and groups who might not be available to any backbone. And it provides some indicative solution costing in terms of how costing might be done, but they're not final costs that would need to be picked up by council. Next slide, please. So that basis, it applies the 2014 update of the New Zealand Public Alerting Options Assessment and Decision Support Tool, and it builds on regional reviews for Bay of Plenty and Waikato in 2017 and 2015, which are quite relevant. They have similar high priority hazards. Next slide, please. So for Hawke's Bay, working with Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management, the key hazards are listed here for Hawke's Bay in agreement. At the left, these are really the ones where warning is most relevant, requiring rapid warnings for life safety. So short onset, well less than 3 hours. And you can see in red there, the highest priority being tsunami local source, being a matter of minutes rather than hours. Next slide, please. So this is really the only earth science slide in here, just linking back to that requirement for rapid onset warnings. Especially in the last 20 to 30 years, we've really recognized we have a large tsunami source within less than 1 hour's travel time to New Zealand's coast, that red circle on the left, as well as a full range of sources right out to the rim of the Pacific, at the edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Our alerting in New Zealand dates back to the 1960s, following a major Chilean tsunami from South America, where in the 60s and 70s, we were mostly thinking our tsunami risk came from across the Pacific. We now realize the same large tsunami as we saw in the Indian Ocean in 2004, Japan in 2011 can originate from directly offshore, and especially offshore of Napier, with travel times of minutes to tens of minutes. Next slide, please. Fundamentals of warning for such rapid onset hazards. So most importantly, that local source tsunami. Alerting systems, they need to deliver the best timely information so people can make an informed decision during warning, and importantly, have enough time to conduct as much protective action, basically evacuation, as possible. I notice a hand up from Maxine. No, it's down again. Two of the critical considerations for alerting are providing that heads up and instruction I mentioned earlier. So heads up being an ability to alert people, whatever they're doing, and inform that there is a threat ahead of the threat, but also give instruction. So the ability to provide details, what's happening, where and when, and what action is required in the warning. Next slide, please. So I mentioned our understanding of tsunami has evolved since the 60s. The other major development in the last decade is our national backbone alerting systems. We have now, since 2017, installed emergency mobile alerts, which are based on an underlying technology called cell broadcast. They've been live for almost 5 years now. All compatible phones receive the alert at once with no congestion. And as of 2019, the last national test, it was being received by over 77% of handsets, and we expect that to continue to grow as handsets churn. It hasn't been tested quantitatively in the last 2 years because it's already being used for COVID, and there's a reluctance to run national tests, which would have been right around the times of lockdowns using EMA at the same times. There are also a range of hazard apps. Probably the most ubiquitous in New Zealand is the Red Cross hazard app, which now propagates EMA messages straight away. And a key point there is it works over Wi-Fi and on any handsets that don't receive an EMA message yet. Next slide, please. So a summary of recommendations. Again, these are led by my Massey co-authors. An emphasis on natural warnings is for the fastest arriving tsunami, long or strong get gone messaging, and that's critical to be enhancing. A backbone of emergency mobile alerts and mobile apps, especially for Napier, because of the ubiquitous mobile coverage, is an available solution with very high effectiveness, the highest rating of effectiveness. Infill options throughout the region. It's really mostly for other areas of the region where there might be gaps in mobile coverage. There would need to be some more work looking for those gaps. Some mobile coverage mapping in the region, mostly away from Napier, will be still needed. Multi-endpoint platform and one-stop shop for alerting are a good idea, especially, again, outside of Napier, where there might be other solutions involved beside mobile technologies. The following slide touches on the Napier Siren system, and then Ian will explore that recommendation from Civil Defence Emergency Management after me. We also recommend a staff resourcing increase to enhance education engagement and especially exercising for response. My personal experience of working in Japan after the tragedy there was in the months following their impacts was the communities who exercised regularly and had high education and especially exercising had the highest survival rate in tsunami, regardless of technology. Next slide, please. I think this is probably the last core slide. So that siren recommendation led by Marion and David is the current signal-only siren system in Napier isn't fit for purpose in the context of that current day alerting. It was the leading technology in the 60s and 70s, especially for distant sources. It does provide a heads up, but it does not provide detailed instructions, and human behavior is to seek further information if they don't have instructions. So that rise and fall signal intends to communicate, seek more information, and that will take time. Upgrading that current siren system to a PA loudspeaker system that can give a message of instruction could be considered. However, a PA loudspeaker system has a high startup cost and will have substantial ongoing maintenance and testing costs.
Sorry, your sound has almost gone, Graham.
Say that again, sorry?
Oh, I couldn't hear the last sentence you said.
Oh.
One. Yeah.
There you go, internet from the other side of the North Island. Yeah, so I'm reading from the screen, especially for this slide, because these are documented recommendations. A key point that we've seen throughout the world where a move to instruction-based PA loudspeaker siren systems is they do have that high startup cost, but especially a large ongoing maintenance and testing cost that should be accounted for. And the coverage is restricted to geographic areas where it's highly audible. So depending on your decisions, costs may outweigh effectiveness in many areas, especially dense areas where you have full mobile coverage. So Napier City as an urban area already has ubiquitous coverage of mobile with emergency mobile alerts and mobile apps already in play there with national automated warning going straight to those devices. Costs for siren maintenance and upgrade are likely to be better spent on public education for that natural warning that I talked about from the Japan observations, increasing network coverage and strengthening that backbone. Thank you.
May I ask a question of you, please? Just a couple of points that you raised in your presentation. Sure. Thank you. What would an EMA actually say or do to alert and inform somebody in the time of a disaster?
So there are 2 points there. It's really important to recognise for the fastest arriving tsunami, the most important and fastest warning will be that long or strong earthquake. So enhancing that and not having people wait is really what's going to save lives. For tsunami coming from a little bit further away, where the shaking might not be as strong, especially to wake people up in the night, the EMA will arrive first, and it will be a loud, unique waking the person up noise with a message printed over the face of the screen, basically saying evacuate now.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have, you talked about extra resourcing for public education.
Yes.
Resourcing of whom? Are we talking about resourcing or by the Hawke's Bay CDM, or are you talking about us?
So this is really about Hawke's Bay CDM or the wider Hawke's Bay versus Napier City Civil Defence Emergency Management. Your individual arrangements are probably beyond my full awareness. Being able to basically mentor and reach community groups and walk them through evacuations on a sustained and ongoing basis throughout the coastal regions. What we've seen from Japan is, that takes local engagement efforts throughout each year. The exact costing would depend on how your experience already is from your existing engagement people, but it could be in the ballpark of needing a person per 25,000 people in the population. Certainly, that's the type of intensity we see in some of the most effective areas in Japan.
So that would be from council, that resourcing.
It would need to be from council or local. It's community engagement within your own portfolio if you want to reach those groups to that extremely high effectiveness. I guess a key point with Japan is they actually had a 95% survival rate. We're seeing nationwide more of a 2/3 intention and action to evacuate when they feel long or strong earthquakes at the moment, which is a lot smaller percentage really. And so this intensive community engagement, especially around exercises, is probably for the whole country has a long way to go.
Thank you. Are there other questions of the speaker? No. Well, are there other parts of your presentation, Ian, from any of your speakers?
Here's Ian McDonald. I'll pass over to you, Ian, to run through your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, can I have that brought up, please? Whoever's controlling the presentations.
Yeah. Ian McDonald might also be able to elaborate on some of the community engagement and public education that the group carry out alongside our community strategies team in that space.
Yeah. So good morning, councillors. So I'm just going to quickly take you through this presentation. I've tried not to double up on what Graham has said, but really just give you a very brief overview of the system. I mean, you've got it in the paper, some of the issues, what are the options, and what is the recommendation. So next slide, please. As Graham said, 1960 Chilean earthquake, 4.5 metres in Napier. That was really, I think, from what I understand, the catalyst of establishing this system. Now that 1960s, early 1960, even I wasn't born at that stage. So the system has been around for quite a while, and that was the appropriate technology at the time. Various locations across the city, but there are a number of gaps, and that's covered in the report in terms of, in particular, the FEN sirens, which are no longer available to us to use. The last public test, full-on public test, was in 2018. We continue to do what's called flick tests until the end of 2019. So that's just a quick test to see if the siren starts to rise, and we have to do that by individual siren. And then the ability to use the FEN sirens was removed that year. And then the New Zealand standard on tsunami sirens came into force mid-2020. The system is dependent on power and the VHF net radio system to actually be able to work. And the system at the moment, so it is owned by Napier City Council, with the testing and the maintenance funded by you but delivered by us. And that's how the system is managed at the moment. Next slide, please. So just running through some of the issues, there is a lack of understanding amongst the community. We've done a number of research surveys over the years as to what the purpose of those sirens actually are. And it cannot deliver information on what to do. And I think that is a key thing, and Graham has mentioned that. So when we've surveyed people in Napier, what would you do if the siren went off? By far the majority of people, we're talking up into the 90%, would say, I'm going to evacuate up the hill sort of thing, move to high ground. And that can result in appropriate actions, and I'll use volcanic ash as an example. Mount Ruapehu erupts, prevailing wind means we're going to get something here in Hawke's Bay ashfall within a couple of hours or so. We use the sirens, people evacuate out of their homes when in fact we want them to shelter in place. So in fact, what could happen is that you'd have a number of people up on the hill who are going to be impacted by volcanic ash. They are dependent on power and VHF radio system, and those two things, but power in particular is vulnerable to earthquakes, which actually generate the tsunami, particularly local source tsunami. A number of other organisations in Hawke's Bay actually use the same tone of siren for on-site emergencies. FENS use it for activating their volunteers at times. Taradale, West Shore, Bayview. The port uses the same siren for the emergencies, as does Whakatu call stores. This has resulted in a number of false alarms over the years, and just about every month we would have a phone call coming into our duty system saying the sirens are going off, what's happening? And it's usually one of those things that I've just mentioned. And so that over time does start to reduce the effectiveness of the system, because people just think that it's another false alarm. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the New Zealand standard, it is the wrong tone, but I've also just added this as a direct quote out of the standard. And basically what the standard is saying is that sirens are not regarded as effective or reliable for local tsunami events, and the use of fixed coastal sirens for tsunami warning is not advised. So that just reinforces what Graham has been telling you. We would require new hardware in order to meet the New Zealand standard. So the sirens themselves would have to be actually replaced. We couldn't retrofit the existing sirens to make the new the right tone. And as has been mentioned, reduces community resilience and results really in dependence on the system. And the Japanese experience has already been talked about, but I think that's particularly relevant for us here in Hawke's Bay. So next slide, please. And if you can just click, please. So lessons from Japan, click, please. As Graham has mentioned, survival rates are higher amongst communities where people evacuated as soon as possible, and education and practice drills were significant factors. People who waited had worse outcomes than those that left straight away. And that is what the sirens start to encourage people to do, which is wait for that sound to occur. And once again, sirens are not reliable. And I think for me, that's from an operational perspective, that's the biggest concern. The experience from Japan was that most sirens could not work because they were either damaged by the earthquake or they didn't have power. And also the people that are responsible for activating were unable to do so. So, if you think about it, we have a significant earthquake in Hawke's Bay, we are going to be affected as well. And so our ability to go through the process of activating sirens is going to be compromised. Next clip, please. So really what we're saying to people is that if you wait for sirens or a text message before you evacuate, you lose those essential life-saving minutes. And the earthquake is still the most reliable warning siren. And if we have a distant source scenario where it's generated across the Pacific, well, then we do have time in order to issue official warnings using the emergency mobile alerting system in particular. Next slide, please. So just continuing on, old technology, and it is not easily supported anymore. We're having issues even having our VHF radio network supported because the people that actually, they don't train for those sorts of systems anymore. And so we're relying on a reducing expertise pool in order to maintain these older systems. So I'm just going to quickly go through emergency mobile alerts, and I've got some examples on the next slide, but it is a national system. It is administered and funded nationally, so we don't pay for it. Sorry, can you go back to the previous slide? As has been mentioned, we have full coverage in Napier. There is a lot of redundancy in that system, a lot more than exists in the Siren system. So it can be activated at a national level, at a regional level through the CDM group. So me and my staff can activate it, and we've had training in it. And then finally through the Fire and Emergency Communications Centre. So if I am compromised in any way and not able to access the system, I can ring up the comm centre, for example, and get them to put one out on my behalf, and the same with at a national level as well. It is a lot more resilient. The cell phone system, although it could be subject to some damage, it is more resilient than the power system. There are battery backups for most cell phone towers, if not all. So that still allows the system to be used in some capacity if there is no power. And as has been mentioned, we're getting very high rates of people receiving those alerts. And the big thing is that they can tell people what the problem is and what to do, which the current sirens cannot. So next slide, please. So here are some real life examples, and this was March of last year. The first one up the top there was the first one that was sent out by the National Emergency Management Agency, and that can happen literally within sort of 20 minutes to half an hour, depending on obviously factors around what advice they're able to get from GNS and the such like. But since that March event, they've even streamlined their systems further, and also the National Emergency Management Agency has had funding to establish a 24/7 duty system where they actually will have staff in a centre working 24/7, which they have not had before. And that combined with GNS has got a similar 24/7 monitoring system. So our ability to actually get these warnings out very quickly has been greatly enhanced. As we move through those warnings, obviously we can give more information as we understand the detail around what the impacts are going to be. We can give more information to people, and probably more importantly at the other end is actually tell people when the threat is actually over and they can return to their homes. Okay, next slide, please. So the options are, and they're all on the paper, but if you wish to make the system compliant, more resilient and effective, you are going to have to replace the hardware. We're going to have to look at new sirens to fill physical gaps, and we have a number of those. And the other thing which was brought up just recently also was the change in the building codes and requiring double glazing in some of the newer subdivisions has made it even difficult more difficult for people to hear. And generators, if you really want to make the system, this was actually looked at a number of years ago, but at that stage we were talking about $50,000 per siren to put in place the appropriate generator. You'd need to look at an informing system. So if you want to inform as well as warn, and that would be a PA system. You would still need to do education, testing and maintenance, and we would also need to do a more in-depth, detailed assessment of the system site by site, and that obviously is a cost as well. In the report, it talks about $1.5 million in capital, but I think that's conservative, particularly if you want to add in the generators, which is not included in that $1.5 million. Okay, next slide, please. So, disestablishing the system, we acknowledge that there would have to be a fairly detailed and involved public information and media as to why this is happening and what is going to happen next. We would continue to work with NCC staff in particular, but also with, I think, yourselves around how do we continue to improve the public education around tsunamis in particular. We've got signage going up along Marine Parade in the next couple of weeks. Blue lines has been considered, and in terms of the Napier Hill in particular, and evacuation routes, signage, and also resilience. All of these things we're working with your team at NCC to actually develop at the moment. We would need to also continue and do more education around the EMA system, and also some operational stuff about making sure that our system is truly robust and resilient, or more robust and resilient. Long, strong, get gone messaging. And the other thing is evacuation practices. And I think Graham's already mentioned this. So for example, we are doing a bit of work at the moment on tsunami hikoi over this year. So again, more sort of work in this area. So next slide, please. So really the recommendation, and look, I will say this is a strong recommendation from us, is to disestablish the existing system, and through you and your officers, support the use of the EMA system, continue to support and enhance some public information education, and particularly around the long or strong get gone messaging, and also know your zone. So last year we sent out letters to everybody who was in a tsunami zone to make sure they were aware of that. We need to continue on that sort of education. So that's it. Back to you, Chair, if there's any questions.
Councillors, I am aware that we have been meeting for over 2 hours, and the standing orders specify that we take a break after 2 hours. But with your support, I'd like any questions to be directed to Ian. And are there any other speakers from your group? Any other presentations, Ian? No. And at the end of those questions, if we could take a break before we actually discuss the officer's recommendation. So are there any questions concerning the last 2 presentations? Yes, Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, and again, apologies, still getting intermittent internet issues at this end, so I can't put my video on. My questions are reasonably simple, and so is the answer to the recommendations in this report. I think it's really simple, that we acknowledge that time and technology moves on, and I think that makes the decisions we're going to make really easy. But my questions are around, have we got a developed public information or public education program that has been documented, so that as soon as people start being concerned about the absence of the Siren system, they have clear answers on what is going to replace the Siren system and how they should respond? And I mean in a public education environment, not simply a governance policy position. And the second question I have is, how granular can you activate this mobile technology? Can you do it down to a particular cell site, or does it have to be a city-wide or a regional-wide alert?
Good questions.
Okay, I think they probably sit with me and maybe Graham on the last one. So we have got some documentation. So my team have been working on this anyway over the last few years, and particularly we've ramped it up in terms of Napier City Council in the last 12 months, COVID allowing. So definitely, the answer to the question, Councillor, is yes. And we want to take a very deliberate approach to this. And we've already arranged some communications around the decision, hopefully you're going to make today. And in answer to your second question, maybe I can lead off, but Graham, you might want to chime in. It is reasonably granular. We can do it by cell site, but cell sites overlap, and so it's not as simple as saying that EMA is only going to go to that particular little area. So we would, I think, be able to And look, we can't really test this, unfortunately, in the real world until it actually happens. But we can actually do the geo identification of areas as we are establishing the EMA, and we can actually establish the templates. And there are some templates in the system, so that it's already set up with the geo identification of the areas along the coastline, for example. Would we be able to stop it from going to Taradale? I don't think so, because the cell phone towers on the hill probably reach that far. But Graham, you may have more expertise in this than I do.
No, you're bang on. You can pick the cell towers basically, but I guess just reinforcing those one message I gave earlier and highlighting another one. In those first minutes to 10 to 20 minutes, it's that long or strong earthquake we need to get everyone evacuating on. We don't want them waiting for that message. It won't come in those first minutes because there's still technological wait for the shaking to reach the sensors before it can be turned into a message that can come back to EMA. So it might be for a tsunami that's a bit further away, maybe an hour away, that this is the most use if it's not felt strongly. In that case, even then, the system, the modeling won't be that sure exactly the shape of the tsunami or how big it is. So it will basically just light up coastal regions that are going to have ground inundation, and it would say evacuate all zones. So, and I believe there are 20-kilometre domains around the whole country. So you probably have 1 or 2 domains covering Napier. So the very first message, you want to get that early from a safety point of view, but it will go to, I would imagine, all of Napier initially. And it's later on when you're able to give more granular or clear as more information comes in that you might choose specific cell towers.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I just think we need to be really careful that this is not a single hazard warning system or alerting system. This needs to be multi-use. There are many, many different types of hazards that exist. So therefore, there may be a rural fire that a particular rural community needs to know about, or there may be in an industrial area, an incident that the locals need to know about. So I think we have to be really clear that this is not, and that's become part of the problem with the messaging around these warning systems, is what are they for? And how do we avoid that confusion? So I think we have to be really clear that it is a all hazards capable event. And I think the advantage is where it does have those options, it gives us more multiplicity, or the capacity, as you say, to immediately explain why we're sending an alert. And I think that's a really important step forward.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Councillor Simpson. It sounds like a very straightforward decision that we've got in front of us today. Just wondering on this immediate or this early warning system that you're talking about, 20 minutes sounds like a very long time if it's coming from the Hikarangi subduction zone. I'm just wondering, is there a piece of work underway that if a long or strong earthquake is detected by the GNS instruments, that an automatic message could be pinged out for the people who didn't necessarily, I don't know, say someone slept through the earthquake?
Yeah, I guess the key point for Napier is we don't expect any chance of them sleeping through that earthquake. This is the biggest earthquake you've felt in your life. 3 to 10 minutes in duration, hard to stand up, hard to stay in bed. For more like an hour's travel time, that's where it becomes iffy, and that's where every minute certainly counts in terms of getting a technological warning. And yes, there are big research programs underway at the moment to bring that down minute by minute over the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
They always say there's no silly question, but how do we notify people who don't have a cell phone?
I'll kick off and Graham may wish to chime in. I suppose it's the same as how do we notify people who are deaf, for example, or have reduced hearing. And it's extremely difficult. As part of the education program, I would see people needing to work with their family around this. So if they, for example, had a hearing impaired person in their family, then they need to have some sort of way of they receive the alert and alerting their family member. There are other options, as has been pointed out, around the web, and that's what we want to actually investigate across the region. So what we're going to do is this paper will essentially go to the coordinated executives group, then the chief executives and emergency services at the end of this month for some decisions. So the backbone would still be the EMA, but we would have other systems that would back it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, oh yes, Chief Executive.
Yeah, just supporting Ian's comments there, and through you, Chair. There is also procedures, for example, where it's safe to do so, to deploy police and or foreign emergency to patrol with lights and sirens to gain attention where it's safe to do so. So there are a number of mechanisms that can be used, but none of it can be used in all scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Right. Well, I'd like to call a break for 10 minutes so we can stretch our legs. It's now 11:15, so if we can come back at 11:25 and have a look at our officer's recommendation or discuss any other questions that have come up in the interim. Thank you. See you soon. Councillors, welcome back. Just before we move to the officer's recommendation, are there any further questions or comments at this stage? You will be able to ask questions throughout the debate or discussion, but are there any further ones before we go to the officer's recommendation, which I will advise you has been slightly added to, which you'll see in a minute? No. Okay, well, moving to the officer's recommendation, the Deputy Chair and I have added a couple of phrases to the existing recommendation, and hopefully we'll have a chance to see it there. So, approve the decommissioning and removal of the remaining Napier City Council owned Siren warning system infrastructure from the remaining locations. And it's not continue, but it's just not continue to support, but support the EMA system and continue to support the Hawke's Bay and continue to support, that's right, to support the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence. So just that came from some of the information in our own papers and the recommendations that have been presented to us today. So is there somebody who would move that recommendation?
Through you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move, but I was actually going to suggest a second motion as well, along the lines that the CEDM group present to Council their proposed public education program, include. Sorry.
Go. Yep.
The CEDM group provide to Council for information their proposed public education program including the frequency and outreach components. And what I mean by that is these areas around who looks after the disabled or the hearing impaired. It's similar to what you had amended, but it's just a little bit more specific. I think it's important that we see the program.
Right, you are aware that some of that program will be through our own community strategies program as well.
Yes, but the program will need to be regional because it's, you know, we have a regional CEDM office, events in our region are regional, so therefore the program probably needs to be a regional program, but we have a component in Napier to do.
Okay, are there any comments about that before I seek a mover and a seconder for that motion, resolution?
Kia ora, through the chair, Steph. So just noting that the proposed public education system will go through the joint committee as part of the CEDM process. So I think if there's going to be debate about that second proposed resolution, it's along the lines of whether or not that can be delegated to the joint committee members or whether it needs to come back to full council. Thank you.
How do you feel about that, Councillor Simpson?
Well, our area of interest is our residents. So I think our primary concern is that there is a program, whether it be regional or local, but that we are clear on what that program is for our residents.
All right, so I accept that. So are you prepared to move the motion, Councillor Simpson, as it stands?
Yes, I am.
By the way, the bold doesn't, I suppose the bold just shows what's been changed. Yes, thank you. Is there a seconder? Once again, it's a bit hard for me to see anybody's hands up. Could somebody just say yes?
I'm happy to second, Maxine.
Oh, right. Who's that? Hayley, is it?
Councillor Brown. Yes, Hayley.
Oh, Councillor Brown, sorry.
Just
right.
with one change to the wording, I don't think it changes the intent, but where it says and support the EMA system, wouldn't it be move to the EMA system? Because it's a free system, we don't need to financially support it. We would just be using the system, is my understanding.
Seems reasonable to me. What about you, Councillor Simpson?
Through the chair, I just see the CE has his hand up, but just on that, in terms of moving to the emergency mobile alert system, it is already in place. We have actually received emergency mobile alerts before through COVID, so it is actually a well-established system that's already in place.
So maybe continue to use instead of support?
Well, why would we not continue to use it in a way, I guess? It's just support. It would be good to be in there for the public to see. We're not just taking something out, but we're putting something back in and what it is.
Is the word we're looking for promote?
Promote. That sounds, how does that sound to you, Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, we've got Ian McDonald and CE Stephen Orthodox's hands up.
Yeah.
Right, so Ian McDonald, your comments, please. That'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'll just look. I'm completely comfortable with this. It is about sort of the support. The EMA system cannot be activated by a local authority. It has to be activated by the CDM group. So what I'd be looking for is just the support of the council in terms of councillor support in terms of getting it out there. But also the support from your officers in terms of any system type support or processes type support, and quite comfortable to provide you with for information. Obviously, the decision, as has been pointed out by your chief executive, is around the joint committee, but definitely getting your input and feedback on any education program. Quite comfortable with that. Thank you.
Chief Executive.
Further to add, just supporting Ian McDonald's comments. Thank you.
So the word in there remains support, does it, or has it been?
Yeah, sorry, I think I understand the premise behind support now. Thank you.
So what we see in front of us is the new recommendation, moved by Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Brown. So Councillor Simpson, do you want to speak specifically to this?
I'll hold my my comment. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Brown, do you want to speak now or in reserve?
I'll just quickly say it just makes sense. I think to move with the times, greater than 77% is a great hit rate. It's more resilient, reliable, it removes confusion, it's free, it's fit for purpose, and it's easily updated with continuing improvements in technologies. So to me, it sounds like a good decision to make.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Please, I can't see your hand. Right. Okay, if there are no other further speakers, we've had 2 in favour. Would you like to take your right of reply, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, as Councillor Brown indicated, I think we need to acknowledge that time and technology's moved on. I think it's important that we acknowledge the staff that have maintained and implemented our warning system in recent years, and as acknowledged by Dr. Leonard, it was one of the best in the country for a long period of time, but it's now no longer fit for the purpose that we need it to serve. So I think it's important that we also recognise that there are within our community people that either don't have smartphone technology or may need assistance should this warning system be used. I think it's therefore important that we are clear as representatives of our community what the education program and how such a warning would be implemented and the expectations of our residents. So I ask that staff inform us of that education program. It's been interesting reading through the information. I think we can have confidence in the cellular system and network to provide us a suitable and adequate warning system going forward. And we trust in our staff to establish good processes and practices to ensure that when we need it, it works and our community understand it. Thank you.
Thank you, well put. All right, the recommendation is being put. All those in favour say aye or raise your hand. All those
Aye.
against, don't say no or don't raise your hand. The recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. It was a very productive additional input from councillors.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to just take a very quick minute just to acknowledge that while we were doing the civil defence paper, of course, the 91st anniversary of the Napier earthquake passed us at 10:47. So I think it's just ironic that we were discussing such hazards and the way our community is led and organised for such events.
Very appropriate. Thank you for the reminder. Right, the last item on our agenda today, item 3, is the Community Grants and Funding Overview. And I'd like Belinda McLeod, Community Funding Advisor, and Matt Adamson, Senior Advisor Policy, to present to us, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora koutou katoa. I'll just point out that Belinda is on the call as well to answer any questions you have, and so is Natasha too. So this report covers the activities of the Community Grants and Funding Program between the 2018 and 2021, so the last 3 completed financial years. I'll largely take the report as read, but I do want to touch on a few key points before handing over to you for questions. So during the past 3 years, Council has awarded over $3 million in grants through this program to over 100 individuals and groups. These grants fell across 9 different funds, and the split across different sectors is illustrated in figure 1 in the paper. The Community Strategies team acknowledged the importance of the 4 aspects of community wellbeing coming back into local government and how that is very critical to what we do these days. So a breakdown of the proportion of funding across wellbeings is presented in section 3.5. The past 3 years have seen significant challenges for our community sector, as I'm sure you're well aware, and this is reflected through our community funding activities. Our response to COVID-19 involved 3 different funds that were one-offs and things that we hadn't really done before, most notably Te Pua Waitanga and the Recovery Projects Fund. These funds had an element of innovation, opening up funding to a wider cross-section of groups, for example, social enterprise and startup businesses. Our team were really pleased with the outcomes of this funding, and there were some real success stories out of it, and most groups that we supported through that are still continuing to operate and flourish in what they do. So ngā mihi kia koutou, and over to you for questions.
No hands up. So I guess the purpose of this review was just to pull all this together and see how we can best manage these grants, which I think we're going to have a workshop later on this month. Is it, Matt?
Yes, so that's put in for the 24th of February, so there'll be a good chance for us to get together and look at some of the bigger picture considerations around what we do in the community funding space. So I'll note that this report kind of provides a bit of background information on what it is that we do now and how that's kind of fallen across the community sector.
Right. This is basically just received this report. It's an information paper, so there's nothing contentious to debate here. But I think if there are no questions, and thank you very much for your presentation, Matt, could I have a mover and a seconder for this officer's recommendation that we receive this report? Mayor Wise moving it and Councillor Crystal seconding it. Would you like to speak to your to the recommendation, Mayor Wise?
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Just to say, this is a really useful information for us to have. I think it is. It's good that we take a look at what we're actually paying out in grants on a regular basis, so that we can ensure that they're actually aligned with what we have established as our community outcomes and objectives. So really, really useful information, and I have no doubt that it will assist us in informing any future decision making that we need to do in this space. So thank you to all the staff who were involved in pulling this together.
Councillor Crystal?
Just agree with Mayor Wise, and also being on a couple of these grants committees, it's been really interesting to look back at the history and really interesting information that came through, and moving forward, how we're going to maybe adjust what we do.
Cool. Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation that the Napier People and Places Committee receive this report. All those in favour say aye. Hands up. All those against, thumbs down, hands down. The recommendation is carried. Okay, thank you, Matt. Thank you, team. We've now reached the end of the People and Places Committee meeting. So I now declare the meeting closed and hand over to Councillor Taylor for the Prosperous Napier meeting, if he wants to proceed with that now or take it.